All right. Man, I'm excited about today. I have been looking forward to today all week. I missed you guys last week. I was thinking about this yesterday. Yesterday, I got to spend, the whole day at a regional track meet with my son and his son's track team. I've been helping his school coach. And it's a lot of fun to be around young people and nervous energy and running. Some of you guys know I ran track in college and high school, and I just love it. And so, for some of you parents, any parents of track athletes, and they run track, high school, middle school. So, like, most parents don't exactly love track format because, we got to the school at 6:30 a.m., and then we got back to the school at 10:30 p.m. That was the day commitment of what the track team is. And most parents don't love that time footprint. But I do truthfully love track and field. And we were out there all day having fun, enjoying the weather, good weather, and we were racing. But I did have something happen that, at least in this context, never had happened. This doesn't have a lot to do with today's message other than, it may tie in at some point, but probably not. But we're out there and we're enjoying the day, and people are racing hard, they're running hard, and the girls' mile race just finished, and man, it was a good race, and they ran really well, and there was some excitement, and I'd been recording some times and you doing stuff, and I was with the head coach giving some splits, and all of a sudden, one of the girls came kind of walking up to me, and then with the kindest voice and like a smile on her face, she goes, "Coach, I'm blacking out," and then just fully passes out. And I know what all you're thinking. Did you catch her? And the answer is no, I did not. I did not really expect it to happen, because in 38 years of life and 20 plus years in track, I've never seen anyone so kindly announce to me. It was as if a Chick-fil-A employee was letting you know that they were passing out. "It will be my pleasure to pass out now." And then, thankfully, it was on one of those really nice, soft football fields with all the rubber, so she just kind of bounced a few times. But I was shocked. But she was totally okay. Everything's fine. She came to, no problem. And her first question was, "What was my time, and did I qualify for state?" That was the first thing she said. And I was like, hey girl, maybe what's your name? And then we'll go from to that. But she was all there. She was there. And I say that, this is just like I said, it's a loose tie, and it's not really there. But today, we're continuing our series called Gentle and Lowly. And it's a series, or it's an idea that we've been talking about leading up to Easter, and I just felt led to continue to talk about it. And because we've been looking at this question of the character or the thing that drives the heart of Christ. And we've been basing it out of Matthew 11, chapter 28, where it says, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart. And you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light." And today, I want to look at this idea of Christ, and I want to look at emotions. And I want to look at the emotions of Christ. And I gave that story just as a loose tie-in because the thing that was disappointing is the very next thing I had to tell this poor girl who just ran really hard and then blacked out was, "You didn't qualify for state." And she was disappointed, right? Rightfully so. And she goes, "Oh, I should have ran harder." And I said, "Hey, usually when you black out, they put that at max effort level." That's just usually you hit max effort. Like, there's no more to go than blackout. So I said, "I don't think you had any more. I think today was as good as we could get today." But we deal with emotions. You and I have emotions. Now, we would be giving Jesus a disservice if you disassociate the emotional life of Christ from him. You see, because some people have this confused, or they just really haven't given thought to the humanity of Christ. Jesus, the Son of God, who is God and was with God before becoming flesh, became flesh, was born of a virgin, and walked the earth in human form for 33 years. He then died and rose again and received a resurrected body in which he goes to heaven. He purifies heaven, and it says that he's there today acting as our high priest, interceding on our behalf and being our great advocate. But he is doing that not as if he put on humanity for 33 years and then removed the humanity. Christ put on humanity and remains in humanity today, resurrected in high heavenly places. So therefore, when we read scriptures and verses like Hebrews 2:17, where it says, therefore it is necessary for him to be made in every respect like us, his brothers and sisters, so that he could be our merciful and faithful high priest, then he could offer a sacrifice that would take away the sins of his people. Since he himself has gone through suffering and testing, he is able to help us when we are being tested. Later in chapter 4, verse 15, it says, that this high priest of ours understands our weaknesses, for he has faced all the same testing we did, yet he did not sin. So though Jesus is 100% God, he is also 100% man. And he has experienced the very things that you have. And emotions, as we define them in our modern context and language, are very much a thing that Jesus had. Not just had past tense. Emotions are a thing that Jesus experiences today. But he experienced them in 100% pureness and fullness. So he can experience every emotion without sinning. And I want to unpack that idea. And we could look through and look at biblical accounts of Christ's life in the four Gospels and what was written about him in the epistles later. And we can see many, many different emotions. But there's two that are very much drawn out and are actually connected. And I want to look at them today, because I think that they can help us experience. Because I know in this room we'll have a varying degree of people. There are some people who are here that you would self-proclaim, you would self-say, I am an emotional person, right? And that's okay. And then there are people in this room that you would say, I am an emotionless person. Spock is my brother, and we have rid ourselves of all emotion and only operate on logic. Now, I'm sorry for the Star Trek. I can't help my nerdiness sometimes. Thank you. Why would you clap so fast? No, okay. I'm kidding. Here's the thing. We sometimes put things in categories and different things about emotions and what do you feel and what, and this is too, you're too emotional, or this person's being too emotional, or this and that, and we sometimes can villainize emotions or villainize the lack of emotions. And here's the thing that I can tell you. Wherever you fall on the spectrum, wherever you fall, there is no right or wrong, first of all. And the thing is that has happened is what normally happens when you see things in excess, either excessively too much emotions or excessively not enough emotion, is that it's based out of some kind of hurt. That you hide emotion because you were hurt in a time when you expressed emotion, or that you overly express emotion because it's the only way that you can feel emoted in a way that you are understood. And so when you're dealing with wounds or hurt, we revert and try to push deeper into what our natural inclination is. But you see, those are man's ways, women's ways of trying to self-preserve. But just because we have taken certain things and maybe moved them a certain direction or gone a different way, it doesn't mean that the actual root of the issue, the very root of the emotion that we have, is not something that is not only okay, but is actually God-inspired. Where do you think your emotions came from? Joy and happiness and peace and acceptance and fear and longing and trust, and despair, and sadness, and mourning, and safety. These are all things that we can see. And the Bible talks about that these things that we can experience in the right context, they are possible to experience and still fully be within the will of God, fully be without sin. How do I know that? Because Jesus did it. But how he did it and what he did and what does that mean, we can look at today. And we don't have time to go through every single thing, but today I want to look at two. And one we've touched on, and I want to touch on it again today, because it is the most common emotion that we see in the life of Christ, that we see this stir up in him respond and act out of this emotion, and it is the emotion of compassion. It is the most common thing we see in the life of Christ, that Jesus can be going about doing his thing and he experiences something in his humanity, and what comes out of him is overwhelming compassion. Let's look at a couple examples today. Matthew chapter 20, verse 30, it says, 2 blind men, fully blind, were sitting by the roadside, and when they heard that Jesus was going by, they said, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us." Now, real quick, this is just a little sidebar. You have to understand, these streets are not like what we think about streets. It's not Aspen. It's not like they're sitting on the sidewalk and there's this massive third. Like, streets were narrow. And if you either go to Israel, or if you look at pictures of things, these streets were very, very narrow. I mean, sometimes a very common street was just wide enough for 2 people to pass. And then there'd be a little bit wider than that. But they would set these beggars and blind people and people who could not take care of themselves along the streets for the opportunity to beg. And it said, when they heard that Jesus was coming, they didn't see, they heard that Jesus was coming, they began to say something. Now we just look at it like, they said, "Son of David," speaking to messianic prophecy of the coming Messiah, that this man that I have never seen with my eyes, but I have heard about him, I believe is the Son of God, the Messiah, the one who all of Israel has been waiting. If they call upon him, and you know what's funny? It says the crowd rebuked them and told them to be quiet. Have you ever cried out to God? Have you ever made something known of a request to God in a public way and everyone told you should just stop? I'm trusting God for my marriage. I'm trusting God that my kids will come back to relationship with Christ. I'm trusting God for a healing. I'm trusting God in my finances. I'm trusting God for a promotion. I'm looking out to God that he can bring this healing and this health, this wholeness, this provision. And people just say, I don't know. You probably should just keep that to yourself. Then you won't be as disappointed. If you've ever experienced it, you're in good company. And you're not the first. But what did they do? It says, but they shouted all the louder, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us." And I can just picture this in my mind. Jesus is walking and crowds were following Jesus, went before Jesus everywhere he went. People were always going in front of Jesus, be like, "Jesus is coming, Jesus is coming." And people were always trailing behind Jesus, talking about what they just saw and what they did. And these men who were sat there day after day, week after week, started hearing the rumblings. Something's happening. A crowd's approaching. I can't see what's going on, but something is coming up this road that I don't know. Something as unusual is happening. And they begin to hear, what's going on? Why is everyone coming? And somebody, maybe some little kids running around saying, "Jesus is coming. Jesus of Nazareth is coming." And they begin to say, "I don't know where he is. I have no clue what his proximity is. I don't know how close or far away he is, but I am going to begin to start screaming at the top of my lungs for him to come and have mercy on me." And at first he didn't hear. Maybe because there was too much crowd. Maybe because he was too far away. And in the beginning, the people were like, "No, you need to stop doing this. You're going to distract him, because when he gets here, I want him to be able to do his thing, and that is not to talk to you." So they're crying out and they're screaming. And when he heard it, verse 32 says, Jesus stopped and called to them. "What do you want me to do for you?" he asked. And they said, "Lord, we want our sight." Isn't it interesting that Jesus still asked? One, he already knew. He's the Son of God. Two, if a blind man stops a healer on the street, we probably have a pretty good idea what he wants, right? But notice Jesus still gave them the dignity and the honor and the respect and the opportunity to ask. Some of you won't ask Christ for anything because in your mind you say he already knows. He already knows. But I'm here to remind you today that he's daily asking you, what do you want? What do you want? And they tell you why it's important. They said, we want our sight. Jesus, we are broken. Light cannot enter our eyes. We are overwhelmed and overcome by darkness. And the Bible says, and Jesus had compassion, or Jesus was moved or filled with compassion, and he touched their eyes. And immediately their sight was restored, and they followed him. Seeing, moved with compassion. It keeps going. Mark chapter 1, verse 40, it says, a man with leprosy came and knelt before Jesus, begging to be healed. If you're willing, you can heal me and make me clean. He said, moved with compassion, Jesus reached out and touched him. I am willing. Be healed. Instantly, the leprosy disappeared and the man was healed. Then Jesus sent him on his way with a stern warning. Don't tell anyone about this. Instead, go to the priest and let him examine you. Take along the offering required in the law of Moses for those who have been healed of leprosy. This will be a public testimony that you have been cleansed. You know what's so amazing about this? Sometimes you see this or in Jesus' ministry, especially early on. He would do these miracles because he couldn't help himself. It wasn't the time to do miracles, and it wasn't actually the best thing for the mission that he's on, but he was moved with compassion to heal things that were broken, and so he therefore healed this man with leprosy, even though it didn't actually serve his greater purpose. But compassion wrecked his heart, and he healed him. And there's two things. One, he tells people, and like in this example, don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone. For two reasons. One, although we sit here and say, man, the crowds are amazing. Wouldn't it be amazing if there's crowds? The crowds do not always equal success. And in Jesus' case, in fact, the crowds often equaled the opportunity for him to leave because his ministry couldn't be done. So he didn't want to gain crowds of people who just wanted to see miraculous signs and wonder. He was interested in the hearts of men and women. So the crowds were against it, but also he was thinking about this man. These instructions are very important. This man had been an exile for his entire life, or at least as long as he had had leprosy, and he had been an outcast. And there was a way back from leprosy that if you found yourself cleansed from leprosy according to the Torah law, you could go and show yourself to the priest, and the priest could define you as clean, and you can offer a sacrifice, and that not only just means, hey, your health is good, it means that you are re-accepted back into society. We probably don't understand it. It'd be like, I don't know, you got banned from Facebook for a little while, and then like you gave a pretty please letter, and then they let you back into Facebook, and like, I'm back! But like 1,000 times worse. Jesus was saying, like, listen, I don't want you to just go and say, I've been healed. That's good. I want you to go and to restore full dignity, standing, and honor amongst your people and amongst man. So go do the right thing. They won't know how it is. Don't tell them it was me. He didn't want the honor. He didn't want the glory. He wanted the man's health restored and his standing fulfilled back to being a son of Israel. That's the heart and the compassion of Jesus. His emotion. He wasn't looking for him. This man found him. Last one, Luke 7:12. This one's a hard one for me to get through, so just bear with it. You're like, you can get through the other two. Well, just get ready. Verse 12, it says, a funeral procession was coming out as he approached the village gate. And the young man had died and was a widow's only son. And a large crowd from the village was with her. And when the Lord saw her, his heart overflowed with compassion. Don't cry, he said. You got to remember, Jesus' mom was a widow. Jesus had a special place for widows. Jesus knows something about only sons and what it costs to give up and to lose an only son. And Jesus comes to this place and he sees this procession carrying out a widow's only son. And the weeping and the mourning. And it says that he is overflowed with compassion. And says, don't cry. Don't cry, he said. Then he walked over to the coffin and he touched it, and the bearers stopped. Young man, he said, I tell you, get up. And the dead boy sat up and began to talk. And Jesus gave him back to his mother. A third thing that Jesus really is into is giving children back to their parents. And you know what's interesting? This is what's crazy. This thing happened. But look at the very next verse. Great fear swept the crowd. And they praised God. A mighty prophet has risen among us. God has visited his people today. And the news about Jesus spread through Judea and the surrounding world. Why was there fear and praise and a prophet? We don't have time to get into it, but that's biblical history. When a prophet showed up, really crazy things happened, and usually punishment came. But when Jesus showed up, really great things happened, and compassion poured out. The judgment was then placed on himself. The punishment was then placed on himself. That's why he is our great prophet. Now, though compassion is the number one thing, and there's more examples. I want to levy it against one that is maybe a little contrary, and it would be unfair, in fact, unright to not mention this emotion, which in some people's mind would maybe be the opposite, which is anger or indignation. Because there are many examples of Jesus becoming angry or indignant. And you can say, well, how can he be compassionate? And how can he be angry? Here's something that we have to think about feelings and emotions. We just read 3 things about compassion, right? Now, you and I have all been exposed to, in our life, an example in which we can be walking down the street, we can maybe go on a mission trip, we can go and we can see someone who's in dire need, who's in extreme poverty, who's in extreme sickness. And maybe in that moment, maybe in that time, maybe on that mission trip, maybe in that street corner, maybe when you see that particular homeless, there's this moment of time when you see this person and when you see their particular situation, maybe there's compassion that raises in your heart. But here's what's crazy about our humanity and the very sin nature that we are constantly laying at the feet of Christ. You see, not only does my flesh often make it where I overreact in certain emotions, my very sin nature also makes it where I underreact to certain emotions. And there's moments in which compassion overwhelmed Jesus, and compassion barely rises to the surface in me. Which is why the more I invite Christ to live in me, the more, it is not that I am less driven by emotions. In fact, it becomes more apparently clear which emotion is rising to the surface in the fullness of its purest form. So now compassion is not mixed with judgment. Well, how did they get there? What did they do? That's what he dealt with the disciples, right? Look at this poor blind person. Who sinned, him or his parents? Jesus is like, what's wrong with you? Jesus, they rejected you. Should we call fire on them? He's like, what is your issue with fire? Calm down. You're confused. So we cannot experience things. And so Jesus fully experienced, and here's the thing. When we look at Scripture, Jesus could not have experienced anger if he hadn't already experienced compassion. You see, it's the parent who loves their child the most that gets the most angry whenever their child is mistreated. It is the love and the compassion for their child that rises up a protective instinct and indignation when injustice is created towards their child. And in Jesus' case, when we look at Scripture, this indignation, this anger that rises up is always rising and flowing with love at the same time, with compassion. Here's an example. Matthew chapter 18, verse 6. And this is hard. It says, he's talking to some of the Pharisees and religious leaders. He said this. He said, but if you cause one of these little ones who trust in me to fall into sin, it would be better for you to have a large millstone tied around your neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea. Now, does that sound like just a loving, compassionate Jesus, the lamb, the lion, and the lamb? Like, if you don't know what a millstone is, it's like, a 400, 500, 600 pound stone that was circular, that was connected, and that's what they used to grind wheat and other different grains. And they were massively heavy. They were huge. You can still find ancient ones that are thousands of years old because they're just these massive. And he said, it would be better for you, religious leader, to take a millstone and tie it around your neck and to be cast into the depths of the sea than to cause one of these little ones to stumble. Now, here's the thing. Is Jesus saying that because he loves to deal out divine punishment? Or is he saying that because it's an expression of how much he trusts the little and loves the little ones? We sometimes look at Jesus, see what he does? Who is he protecting? Innocence. What about the time when he went into the temple and we read this famous story of where he gets angry and he overturns the tables? And I mean, this was not an expression of just an instant process of where it was enraged and then flew off the handle. No, we know for a fact that he went in one day, took a look of what was happening, at the thing that he already knew was happening. And then he went out and he took some time because Jesus was a craftsman and he decided to build his own whip by himself, and he was meticulous about it, and he made sure it was just the right length and just the right tension, and it was probably just good enough that it could get the right kind of a snap, but not too hard. He wanted it to be just right. He built that whip, and then in full intention, he came in, and it says that he overturned all the money-changing tables, that he drove out the sellers, and he fulfilled the prophecy where he said that this house was supposed to be a house of prayer, and you turned it into a den of thieves. Now, is that just because Jesus, sometimes he had been having a rough day, the disciples had been annoying him, and this was his chance to just let it all go? Or is it that the temple was supposed to be the place where people who were far from God with sin could come and offer sacrifice to find themselves be reunited and reconnected with God? And that ability had been broken by people who wanted to take advantage of innocence and brokenness and turned a system that was meant to connect people with God to a system that was a money-making ability. So was Jesus angry? Yes. But did he sin? No. Am I telling you that you should go into Walgreens next time and bring a whip and start with, don't do it, you will fail and be arrested? But there was an anger that moved forward, that moved out of him, that was fully righteous, because a thing that moved him to compassion, people who were far away from God, was being broken. And one who is fully human, one who is fully morally upright, cannot help but to be driven to indignant anger when injustice is being created. And I've shared with you guys many times, I've been very open, that anger is one of the things that God has constantly and is continuing to work into my life. And, I'm a long way from where I used to be, but I'm definitely not where I need to be. And that's just a thing that God is continuing to work in my life. But in this process, there's something that even just this morning, as I was praying for this service today, when it comes down to anger, there are examples, there's times when we, as a people, are called to walk in the emotion of anger when injustice and things of the wrong nature are done. That anger, it should be the response, but that it can be settled appropriately without sin. And sometimes that's like, well, how? How? Because I don't do very good. I'm really good at getting angry. The not sinning part seems to be the struggle. In Ephesians 4:26, it says, and don't sin by letting anger control you. Don't let the sun go down while you are getting angry. That's coming from Psalms 4:4. It's a quotation there. And it's painting this picture that, hey, anger exists. Don't allow anger to cause you to sin. And don't allow anger to continue to rule your life. And I was praying, I was like, God, how is this supposed to work? Jesus is doing it, but I'm not Jesus. And Jesus lives in me, but I still sometimes struggle. I feel more like Moses. Like you start doing the right thing in anger, and you just take it a little too far. That was Moses' problem. Like God would be like, be angry at the people. He's like, oh, I can do that, no problem. And he's like, no, go and do this. Go talk to that thing. Go do this thing. I can totally do it. And it's like, what did you do? Why did you break the 10 Commandments? I just gave you those. Oops. Can I have another copy? This is just a side Bible net. The ones he broke, God, it says the finger of God wrote. The second set, God said, you got to write this one. I'm not doing that again. The second one, Moses wrote. That just teaches your kids, if it costs you something, you hold a little more value. So I'm praying, I'm like, God, how do I do this? How do you not take it too far? And he brought this thought to my head. And I don't even have a specific example. But it's something that I've experienced many times, and maybe that maybe something has ever happened to you where you were wronged. Someone wronged you. It could be a false accusation, it could be an injustice, it could be an unfair business dealing. You fill in the blank. And you get angry about it. You're angry about it. And you're just angry and you're just frustrated. It may not even be a business, it may be a diagnosis of health. It may be a financial limitation. It may be something else, and you find yourself angry about it. You're like, God, this is unfair. This is unjust. I'm angry about this. This shouldn't be happening. But have you ever had this happen? Have you ever been angry about something? And someone else finds out about it. And not only are they angry about it, they're actually more angry about it than you. And then they're like, not only angry about it, but somehow they're disconnected enough where they can actually make logical assumptions, and they start to bring truth to this anger, and they start to bring other ideas to this anger, and they start to not only look at the very thing that is in front of your face that because you're angry you can't stop seeing, but they're actually able to look past the thing that's getting you angry and to be able to look to the root of the issue of what is causing this very thing, and they're able to say, let's look at this and we can find a way to fix it together. I am still really angry about this, but I'm less interested in the anger and more interested in the resolution. I know you may think that that person wronged you, but we're actually not wrestling against flesh and blood. We're wrestling against something else. There's something deeper. And you see, when things happen to you and to me, and we're angry about it. I've got something to tell you this morning. Jesus is also angry about it. In fact, because of his pureness and lack of sin, he's more angry about it than you. But he's angry at the right thing. And though we may never fully understand, but God, why is this thing gonna resolve? Is that healing gonna come? Is that finance gonna come through? Is that relationship gonna restore? Are they going to get punished? You may or may not see that. But what I've experienced in my life, even in the natural, and in reflection, I've experienced it even more in the supernatural, is when someone else is not only just angry with me, but when someone else is able to take up the cause and know that the right thing is going to be done, I don't need to hold on to that anger anymore. And instead, I can hold on to the faithfulness of Jesus. I don't have to let the sun go down on my anger, because Jesus will hold on to it as long as it needs to be held on to. Jesus will do with that situation whatever needs to be done. Even if that requires methodically building a whip so that something happens in my life that gets taken care of, Jesus will deal with it. But I don't have to hold on to anger in a way in which my fallen nature will cause me to sin. Instead, I can cast my cares and burdens and angers and frustrations onto Jesus and know you not only feel it, you feel it more, but you feel it correctly. You know what I'm actually wrestling against. You know the root and where my insecurities come from. You know the thing that's making me mad. And you know that when I'm blaming and fighting with my wife and yelling at my kids, but the reality is I'm upset because I have another son who got a diagnosis that hurts my heart. I can give that to you. I don't have to hold on to that anger. It's not at you, it's not at other things. I'm upset. But I can let it go. Because a lot of times the thing you think you're angry at is actually not the thing at all. But when you feel alone, it just makes you dig your heels even more. But when Jesus says, actually, I'm way more angry about this than you. Can I take care of it for you? Can I take care of it for you? Can you let it go and not sin at the injustice and allow me to be your justice and righteousness? And I'll do it perfectly. Interceding on your behalf, being your advocate. It's who I am. And church, this is what I want to do today. Because I could be wrong. But I don't think I'm the only person who struggles sometimes finding the correct balance in emotions. Maybe for me it's anger. Maybe for you it's something else. It could be fear, it could be anxiety. Fill in the blank. Jesus is with you in it. Jesus carries it. Jesus is your guide and your strength in those moments and can keep going. And when you're slumbering, he is still working. And what I want to do today as a church is I just want to invite anybody today for two things to come down front. First, if you want to accept Jesus, we don't usually do it this way, but this is how we're doing it today. I'm going to ask you to just walk down front and let me or one of the prayer team, I'm going to ask the prayer team to come on down. My wife, Vivi, you can come down, we'll pray. If that's you, in a second, you can come down. And there may be a few of you that's the case. But for those of you who have already accepted Jesus, we're just going to sing a song. And if you want prayer, that Jesus could free you to experience emotions in the way that he intended you to experience emotions, and to help you be able to cast your care, your anxiety, and your burden onto him, I want to give you that chance to do that today. By simply coming down to the front as an act of surrender, and allow myself and Vivi and Beth and Bruce to pray for you. And if that's not you this morning, I'm just going to invite you to stand where you're at and join with us in a moment of prayer. And then Pastor Isaiah will dismiss us when we're done.